Good afternoon and welcome to our weekly table talk. As you know, these past 2 weeks have been a challenge for all of us, especially in Texas, in light of the inclement weather and unprecedented snowvid 2021, which sadly caused horrendous damage to our property, especially our classrooms. So we were absent for the last 2 weeks because of shortage in power and shortage in water. So we're blessed to return today in normal weather again with a very high profile special guest stemming from the Madigan family from Dublin, who worked their way into Washington and Boston down into Baltimore. And we're blessed today to have the honourable and infamous David Poist, who joins us today to talk about, thank you audience, one thing about this audience, Dave, they're always so enthusiastic with each and every guest that joins us.
I can see that, they're dressed nice too. I like
they dress nice, they always dress
I feel
up.
a little underdressed.
But I see they deliberately wore their military attire for you, Dave, today, because of your background in the military arena. Before we discuss that, tell me more about your grandma and what prompted her to start the movement from Dublin to Boston to Washington to Baltimore.
Okay, alright, so my grandmother Madigan, I come from a long line of Irish people. There's more than just Madigans, the Davises and the Sullivans and the O'Donnells and the whole nine, there's a whole gamut of them. Well, my great-grandmother Madigan, she came over, she was young, very young, and she came with her brother. They went into Boston around the Southie area. Uncle Mike was I never met him, he was dead before I was born. He was too old. So what he did was he took her down to Washington, D.C. into an orphanage and paid her, but she wasn't really an orphan because he was paying her charter. But he was an old man trying to get his way in business, and he just didn't have time to raise a young girl. So my family that lived in Maryland, the Ellicott City area, they needed a girl because we had farms. It was like a dairy farm, horses, the whole 9 yards. They needed, for the house that they had, needed a girl to work on the inside. Because my grandmother, Garland, she was one of 12. That's what Irish do. All right, everybody's got between 2 and a lot of kids. That's what we do. All right.
Thank you, audience.
So they needed the girls on the inside, so they asked if they could lend her to work in the house, and then eventually she met my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my great-grandmother and great-grandfather fell in love, and that's where they had the 12 kids.
And how old was she when she left Dublin?
I think she was an infant.
And then she started to work domestically at what age?
I think she was 13.
Wow.
So she stayed in the D.C. area until she was, I believe, 13. Now, the dates may be a little sketchy. I'm kind of swagging it. And
tell me, what year are we talking about when she was age 13? What year are we talking about?
I think that was around 19... My grandmother was born in 1929, so we can do the math from there.
So early 32, 33, right before the Great Depression.
Yeah, my grandmother was born in 1929, so we're going to go back before that. I think she came over in 1901, somewhere in that time frame.
The beginning of the 20th century. Wow, that's an amazing history. When you use the word Garland, as a descendant, I just wrote this 2 weeks past to Father Sean Garland, my curate, the associate pastor in my hometown in Ireland when I was a child. He just turned 90 2 weeks ago, and I wrote him a letter to remind him that he baptized me, and introduced me to the Catholic Church, in the presence of my parents and godparents as a 2-week-old baby. And he was the first priest who baptized me in the Catholic faith, and his name was Sean Garland. And I wrote to him just to remind him that almost 60 years ago he baptized me. He's still alive, still active, still waiting to be relieved from priestly duties at 90 years old. So I'm sure there must be a connection between the Garland in your family and the local priest on my side, because that's such a rare name in Ireland. I would have no doubt that they are certainly related. Tell me about your awesome wife and daughter.
My wife is so I met my wife in the Army, and she's from South Carolina, and so we have 5 kids in total. We have Jonathan and Jasmine, Courtney, Kayla, and Kira, and 4 of them in their 20s. And Kira is the one who's still in the house. She was our late bloomer. Me and my wife were both a little bit older when we both got pregnant with her, and it was kind of like, wow, okay, we're both 40. Jeez, all right, a little bit old, but that's okay. And Kira's doing great. Yeah, she's awesome.
Kira is awesome.
She's doing 3 sports. She does soccer, baseball, volleyball. Matter of fact, she's on the Bulverde club volleyball team. And she's 11, got pulled up to the 12-year-old team, so that's cool. She's a good little athlete. All the kids are doing great. All of them are doing college and all kinds of good stuff. So Kira's the only one that's still left in the house. My wife retired 24 years in the Army, and I just retired November 1st with 30 years in the Army. That's why I get to grow this out now.
And it's an amazing look.
Thank you.
It makes you very stately, and very aristocratic. Just, looking at that early 20th century look.
Yes.
And maybe even Victorian, with the Charles Dickens look. But question, your time in the Army, when you joined first, you're young and maybe innocent, not necessarily as mature as you are now, but looking in the early days of the Army and then looking to where you were at prior to retirement, let's talk about, what was and what is in the context of Army life.
When I joined the Army, I came in, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And a lot of kids don't. And Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, they're all good. I won't just speak for the Army. That's the path that I chose. But they give young guys that really don't know what they want to do a path. They give you purpose, direction, motivation. And a lot of 18, 19, I was 21 when I came in. I was going to college. I was playing college baseball until my GPA said that I couldn't play college baseball anymore. Common story. So then what am I going to do? I'm not going to sit at home and eat potato chips all day because I still had the motivation. I was an athlete with no job anymore. So I went down to the Marines. My stepdad was a Marine. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I had a calling because all of my grandmother, she was one of 12, all of her brothers served in World War II or in the military at some capacity, except for the one who stayed behind. He actually got killed in a tractor. And then my stepfather was a Marine, so military's been in the whole family. So it's always been a calling. Well, the Marines couldn't guarantee me airborne school, and the Army guy just stuck his head around the corner and said, "You want to jump out of a plane, young man?" I said, "Yeah, I do." The Marines can't offer it, guarantee it. We got a job for you. So I went in. I thought I'd only do a couple years. I'd do a couple years, find my way, and then go do something else. My father had told me, because he was in construction like most of my family, he said, "You'll have your PhD, guaranteed, no doubt. You'll be a post hole digger. I guarantee you'll be a post hole digger. I can put a fence in like nobody's business." But I knew that's not what I did not want to swing a hammer for a living. I did not want to put a post hole and put fences in for my whole life. So I joined the Army and I stayed. I stayed in the Army for 30 years. Now, when I was that young age, I never would have thought I would have stayed. But as you start to mature and you start to grow, you start to get a little responsibility, things kind of change. What I like about the Army and the military in general is, I don't know what it's like on the civilian world, I'm about to find out. You get promoted based on how well your subordinates are doing. When your subordinates are failing, you don't get promoted. When your subordinates are doing well, you get promoted. And that's what we have to do, because that's what our job entails downrange, down in deployment. We train for war. And then, because we as leaders, there's a good possibility you're going to get killed. So the lowest guy needs to know what the mission is. The senior and middleman can't have all the knowledge and not pass it down. All right, it's a see one, do one, teach one mentality. All right, I take the young kid, I say, "I'm going to teach you." All right, you got it? Yeah. Good, let me see you do it. Good, now teach him how to do it. All right, and it's that model, it's very simple. It's not anything cosmic. but it's a model that works for us, you know. And I just kept, you know, by the grace of God, I just kept getting promoted. And I mean, I had some stumbling blocks along the way. I think anybody does. Mine, you know, were here and there, but and then I met my wife, you know, and then she really gave me the right. I call her my chief of staff. She's my chief of staff.
We hear many horror stories, Dave, you know, that sadly happens in the military with addiction in many forms. You know, we see many men and women, you know, who start off so beautifully, you know, and sadly, you know, end up, you know, going through many stressors, PTSD, addiction in many forms. Help us understand why that would even happen.
Well, you know, my experience is, you know, I was labeled as PTSD, but it's part of my disability that I get is PTSD, 70% of it. I'm not afraid to tell you, okay? And the other part is TBI from the IED that I was hit with. How do you manage that? How do you go on, okay? How do you not be the victim, all right? And then, of course, with PTSD, there's a lot of other factors that come in. There's alcohol and there's drugs. You know, I'm not going to speak badly of any doctors or scientists or anything that's out there because they have their mission, they have their roles. What people do with those certain, how they handle those situations are different. I can tell you that I got addicted to alcohol, all right? But I can also tell you this, nobody put a drink in my hand except for me. And what we do is we teach each other. I was taught to stop being the victim. Stop being the victim and blame somebody else. All right? You own it, and we're going to teach you how to live on God's terms and on life's terms. All right? And I'm in a program, and I don't speak for that program, but the program works. All right? It has 2 letters, and if anybody knows what I'm talking about, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm not a spokesman for that group, so I won't say who they are, but it doesn't take a rocket science to figure who. But I've been in that program, been sober for 4 years. And one of the biggest things those guys told me is, thank you. One of the biggest things those guys told me was, all right, we're going to work these steps, son, okay? And there's a 12th step right here. It says, having had a spiritual awakening, as a result of these steps, a spiritual awakening, all right, you're going to take this message, you're going to carry it to the alcoholic who's still sick and suffering. So you're going to work these steps, you're going to come to a spiritual understanding, all right? And in the book it talks about, there's a scientist, and there's the medical doctor, and there's the clergy. All 3 of these guys are highly important people in the world, but they could not crack the code on alcoholism, and now drug addiction as well. And you're telling me that there's 2 drunks that when they get together and they sit down and they talk to each other, they've cracked the code on this? Really? How does that work? Well, let me tell you how. Because when I'm sitting with a young lad and he walks in that door and I can see the 4 horsemen are riding right behind him. He's got bewilderment, terror, fear, guilt, shame. And he says, man, I've done it again. I just can't stop. And I can sit there and say, sit down, lad. I know exactly how you feel. Because of your misery, I've walked in your shoes. And I've done the same things you've done. But there's a way out of this. All right? And we're going to get you spiritually connected. All right? Now that turns a lot of people away. All right? So in our program, you know, we do say, look, in these rooms, we don't talk religion. We talk spirituality. You walk in these rooms, because that's what I did. First thing I did was I said, wait a minute now. I'm Catholic. I don't need your program, thanks. I'm all set. I'm ready to walk out. And my sponsor told me straight. He said, whoa, time out. You're Catholic? You keep your God. Keep them. We don't care if you're Jewish. We don't care if you're Pentecostal. We don't care what you are. We're talking spirituality. We're not talking religion here. We're talking spiritual connection. Because I guarantee if you had a spiritual connection, you wouldn't stick that bottle in your face. You lack power. You lack the power. And when you lack power, you're going reaching for that bottle. And we're going to teach you where the power is. There's only one thing that can take that away from you. It's not a human being. It's not a doctor. It's not a pill. It's not treatment. One thing, that thing is God. May you find him now, and you can't. When you lack power, you reach for the bottle. That's your power. Your drinking is not your problem. Your drinking is your solution. And let me tell you why. Every time you pick up that drink, are you sober? Mm-hmm. That's the insanity of drinking. So you don't need to stop drinking. You need to stop starting. The malady starts with you when you start to drink because you're sober. And that's where it started for me. And that's where the whole thing changed. With the PTSD thing, I can tell you for me personally, once I worked these steps, what I found was, once I got sober, because first I tell you what it was. I walked in, he was my Sunday God. I got God on Sundays, 6 days a week are mine. Then I got sobriety. So I had, okay, so now God's my Sunday God and my sober God, but I'll manage the wife and the kids and the job. Thanks, God, keep me sober and I'll work everything else out. And what I found is I was miserable. I had no emotional sobriety, all right, because I wasn't giving it all to Him. I wasn't conceding everything. You know, I told my sponsor, I said, man, I'm working this program. When am I going to be happy? I'm not. He said, you giving it all away? Well, I think so. I don't think you are. Give it everything to Him. All of it. Give everything to Him, man. You're trying to run the show. You're trying to run everything. Give it to Him. Let Him make... the power that is in this program... To someone who's not alcoholic, it's hard to explain. All right? And once you... In the book, our book, on page 83 to 88, it'll tell you how to do it. How do you do this? How do I get this connection? How do I pray? All right?
Going back, Dave, you chose to put that first drink in your own hands, and you continued to do that. What was the defining moment or the catalyst that introduced you to choosing to put that first drink in your hand?
Oh man, so growing up as a kid, like a lot of Irish communities, especially in the Northeast, where everybody lives around each other. You know, Uncle Jim lived here, Uncle Tim lived here, you know, my grandma lived here, my Queenie lived here. Everybody lived around each other. You know, that's common. In the Northeast, cities are, you know, kind of, everything is kind of, you know, think about it. What's all in the Northeast? You got all those big cities, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Boston, New York. There's ports, and everybody gets off the boat. Somebody's waiting at the dock. You bring those people in, and you hunker them down to the city. So it's not uncommon. So in those communities, you're tight. Those Irish communities are tight up there. And they all live around each other, and they do everything together. They do a lot of, there's always, you know, we partied on everything, you know. And everybody has a lot of kids. There's a lot of birthdays, a lot of communions, a lot of marriages, weddings, you know, everything. Birthday parties, you know. So we partied a lot, and it was not unacceptable for I don't want to say a child, but like a kid, even a child, taking a sip out of dad's beer, you know. And then you're a young teen, you know. You can have one. Your kid's been good today. Go have one. And it was totally acceptable. It was okay. But once again, it's not my parents' fault. It's not my family's fault. My drinking problem was my fault. My program tells me, stop blaming society. Stop blaming anything. You are the problem.
And sadly, there are consequences, because many of those folks who drank so young have now become alcoholics. It's tragic.
A lot of them stay that way, Father. So just real fast, getting back. So got a Sunday, then He's my God of sobriety, I'll handle the rest, all right? What I didn't have was emotional sobriety. When I gave it up to Him completely and whole, because I had the connection now. I had a connection, a higher power, which I called God, all right? When I got on my knees and asked Him to remove the obsession of drink, I don't know why it happened. Because if you would have told me 10 years ago, one day you're going to get on your knees and you're going to ask God to take this away from you, I would have been like, no way. Me, the Irish guy, with the man cave, that's awesome, and the kegerator, somebody's going to pull my Irish card if I do this.
And sadly, Dave, on the other side of the coin, before we finish, you know, there are men and women, you know, young adults who are not alcoholics, who enjoy drinking in moderation, and still have chosen to exclude God.
They do. Finding the emotional sobriety, Father, will fix a lot of problems too, real fast.
So, right. How do they find whether they're an alcoholic or not, emotional sobriety?
Well, one, acceptance. All right, I can't call anybody an alcoholic. You have to believe that you're an alcoholic. That's the problem. Everybody else said I was an alcoholic, but you know what happened? If I would stop drinking because you told me that, first time I got mad at you, I would drink because of you. I would drink on you. I'll show you. I'll show you. And it leads down that sneaky road of PTSD, okay? PTSD is a same type of thing. My story now, I can only speak for me. I can't take another man's inventory. I can only talk for me. Once I got spiritually connected to God, now when I come to church and I hear the message, I have a whole new understanding of what the priests are talking about. All right, and when I'm teaching the 5th grade formation and I'm reading the Bible, I get it. But I had no connection. I was caught in a malady of depression because I had no connection. I thought I did simply because I was Catholic. Simply because I showed up to church, I have a connection with God. And my sponsor said, no, you don't. To know there's a God and to know God are two different things. You're not putting it into action. And in these 12 steps, we're going to put it into action. You're going to get to know God here. And then when you go back into your church, you'll have an understanding of what they're talking about. Because right now, you don't. You only know what your mommy and your daddy and your priest told you. All those prayers you say, they're all written down, and they're good, but they're all recited. Somebody else wrote them. Have you ever had a conversation with God? Have you hit your knees and asked Him something? Have you ever meditated to Him? Just you and Him. Have you ever meditated and just shut up and stop letting your brain go 100 miles an hour?
It's amazing, Dave, and I know doctors, priests, all professions, witness men and women who are alcoholics. It could be the priest, the doctor, the school teacher. Sadly, it's such a terrible, tragedy to see so many professions and so many lives challenged by, alcoholism and alcohol abuse, in all walks of life. And please God, whatever profession you may hold in life, in the secular or the sacred, please God, over time with God's grace and human support, re-engage, and fight for that emotional support that so many need. Just briefly, Dave, the young man who died on the tractor, tell me about him.
So that was Uncle Pat. I never knew him. He died. So all of, if I got the story right, all of my grandmother's brothers all went off to war. Uncle Pat, because he had a farm, they had farm animals, he was the youngest, he had to stay back. That's in a time where the youngest boy had to stay back and take care of the farm. All of my 5 great uncles returned from war graciously, but Uncle Pat, there was a cow that got out, and he went on a tractor to try to corral this cow and flipped it over and was killed.
Was he a Madigan?
No, he was a Garland as well. So Madigan was my great grandmother.
Pat Garland.
But when she got, no, actually, I'm Maynard, M-A-N-O-R.
Manor.
So she was Madigan. She married Manor.
Manor.
And then they had 12 little Manors. And my grandmother, Teresa Manor, married my grandfather, Jack Garland. And then,
so Irish with all those babies.
what can I say?
Dave, we're so blessed that you are a member of our parish. We're so blessed that your family come here faithfully, to fulfill your weekend obligation and much more, through volunteerism in the faith formation department. Please come back, and visit us, in this particular forum. And my production team has proposed maybe somewhere down the line that we have a town hall meeting and forum to delve into all forms of PTSD and the tragedies associated with that, because so many people are hurting out there, and as a church, we're certainly here to, as we always do, continue to offer support to those men and women and young adults who experience horrendous internal suffering because of so many forms of interior demons and interior battles. So Dave, it was a pleasure. We look forward to seeing you in church and revisiting as time goes on.
And we need a softball team.
Before we close, we have this idle baseball field on our property that is so underutilized. So Dave Poist, I'm tasking you now on live TV, in the presence of a live audience, to start the process.
Let's get it.
For developing a team under our name using our field.
Let's do it.
God bless you and God love you. Bye.